The transport ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of planet designation 7 Theta, a world specifically chosen for its ability to kill unprepared cadets within hours. Inside the cargo hold, 43 students from 17 different species checked their survival kits one final time. The air smelled of fear and recycled oxygen. Quillix clutched his datapad with 3 of his 6 limbs, his compound eyes scanning through the 1,200-page survival manual for the 5th time that morning. His exoskeleton clicked nervously as he reviewed Section 47, Subsection 12, Paragraph 9 about proper shelter construction in hostile environments. Around him, other cadets made their own preparations. Bren, whose blue-green skin glistened with moisture, was triple-checking his water filtration tablets. Tala sharpened her claws against a metal beam, her scales reflecting the red emergency lights. Near the back of the hold, Ryan Foster sat on a supply crate with his feet dangling off the edge. He flipped through the survival manual without much concern, occasionally nodding to himself. His survival kit lay open beside him, its contents scattered in what most aliens would consider chaotic disorder. "Attention, cadets." Instructor Vorn's voice crackled through the speakers. "You are about to begin the final examination of your 3-year program at the Galactic Survival Academy. The rules are simple. Survive for 72 hours on the planet's surface. You each have a standard survival kit, a distress beacon for emergencies, and your training. Use them wisely." Quillix's antennae twitched with anxiety. 72 hours. 3 full planetary rotations. He had memorized every protocol, every procedure, every contingency plan, yet his internal organs still twisted with dread. "The planet below has predators," Vorn continued. "It has poisonous plants. It has weather patterns designed to test your limits. 17% of you will activate your distress beacons before the first night ends. 40% will fail before the examination concludes. For those who succeed, graduation awaits. For those who fail, remedial training and shame." Ryan closed his manual and stuffed it into his pack. He caught Quillix staring at him with multiple eyes. "Not worried?" Quillix asked in the common galactic language, his translator chip converting clicks and whistles into understandable speech. Ryan shrugged. "I read the important parts. Seems straightforward enough." Quillix's antennae flattened against his head in disbelief. Straightforward? This examination had broken students who trained their entire lives. This human had been at the academy for only 3 years, the minimum required time, and he acted like they were going on a camping trip. "The human is arrogant," Tala hissed from nearby. "He will learn humility when the night predators find him." Bren made a gurgling sound that indicated agreement. "Humans always think they know best. Their planet is soft, easy. They have no idea what real survival means." Ryan either didn't hear them or chose not to respond. He was checking his rope now, testing its strength by pulling it between his hands. The ship lurched again and the rear hatch began to open. Wind howled into the cargo hold as the planet revealed itself below. Dense jungle stretched in every direction, broken only by a wide river cutting through the green like a silver snake. In the distance, mountains rose toward the purple-tinted sky. "Drop zone in 30 seconds, Vorn announced. "Your landing coordinates are randomized within a 5-kilometer radius. You will not see each other again until extraction. Remember your training. Trust your instincts. Survive." The cadets lined up at the hatch, their anti-gravity descent packs activated and humming. Quillix ran through his mental checklist again. First priority, find water. Second priority, establish shelter. Third priority, create a perimeter defense system. Fourth priority, locate food sources. Fifth priority, go, 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 Vorn shouted. One by one, the cadets jumped. Quillix took a deep breath through his spiracles and leaped into the void. The anti-gravity pack kicked in immediately, slowing his descent to a manageable speed. He could see other cadets spreading out below him, each heading toward different sections of the jungle. He spotted Ryan falling nearby, arms spread wide like he was enjoying the view rather than preparing for a survival examination. The human was actually smiling. Quillix hit the ground first, his multiple legs absorbing the impact easily. He immediately activated his datapad and began scanning the environment. Soil composition, 73% suitable for burrowing. Water source detected 400 meters northeast. Threat level, calculating. Other cadets landed around the jungle, each in their designated zones. Tala touched down in a rocky area and immediately began marking territory. Bren landed near a swampy region and tested the water with his tongue. Ryan landed in a clearing surrounded by massive trees. He looked up at the towering trunks that stretched at least 30 meters into the canopy. His smile widened. Perfect, he said to himself. While Quillix frantically unpacked his shelter components according to the instruction manual, and while Tala scouted for defensive positions, and while Bren began constructing a water filtration system, Ryan walked up to the largest tree in his area. He touched its bark, knocked on it twice to test its density, and then looked up at the thick branches spreading overhead. He uncoiled his rope and tied one end into a specific knot. Then he threw the weighted end over a low branch about 4 meters up. Quillix, who was monitoring all cadet vital signs through his datapad, noticed Ryan's unusual activity. According to the standard protocols, the human should be establishing ground-level shelter. Instead, he appeared to be playing with rope. What is the human doing? Quillix muttered to himself, even though no one could hear him. Ryan grabbed the rope and pulled himself up with surprising ease. His arms and legs worked together in a coordinated motion that looked almost natural, like his body was designed for this specific task. Within seconds, he had reached the first branch and was standing on it, looking for the next handhold. This is irregular, Quillix said, now speaking into his communicator. Instructor Vorn, Cadet Ryan Foster is not following standard shelter protocols. Noted, Vorn replied from orbit. Continue with your own examination, Cadet Quillix. What others do is not your concern. But Quillix couldn't help watching his datapad screen, which showed a small dot representing Ryan's location, climbing higher and higher into the tree canopy. Every survival manual emphasized ground-level shelter first. Every protocol demanded establishing a defensive perimeter before anything else. The human was doing neither. Ryan reached a junction where 3 thick branches met about 15 meters off the ground. He tested each branch by jumping on it lightly. Satisfied with their strength, he began unpacking his survival kit. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon. By Quillix's calculations, they had approximately 4 hours until darkness fell, 4 hours to complete all priority tasks before the night predators emerged. Quillix worked faster, his multiple limbs assembling his regulation shelter with practiced efficiency. Around the jungle, other cadets did the same. Everyone was racing against the approaching sunset. Everyone except Ryan, who sat on his branch and ate a ration bar while examining the tree structure around him. He seemed to be planning something, but whatever it was, it made no sense to any established survival doctrine. Far above in orbit, Instructor Vorn watched 43 vital signs on his monitor. He had run this examination 63 times over his career. He had seen every strategy, every mistake, every triumph and failure. His eyes lingered on Ryan Foster's signal for a moment longer than the others. "Let us see what you do, human," Vorn said quietly. "Let us see if your species' reputation is earned or simply luck." Down below, Ryan finished his ration bar and stood up on the branch. He pulled out his cutting tool and began selecting which branches to harvest. He had approximately 4 hours of daylight left, and he had a structure to build before the real test began. 3 hours remained until sunset when Quillix finally completed his ground shelter. The structure followed regulation specifications exactly: reinforced walls made from interwoven branches, a waterproof roof constructed from large leaves layered in overlapping patterns, and a narrow entrance that could be sealed quickly in case of predator attack. It had taken him 2 hours of constant work, but the result matched the diagrams in his manual perfectly. He stepped back to admire his creation, wiping fluid from his compound eyes. Around him, the jungle buzzed with sounds he couldn't identify. His training had covered hundreds of alien environments, but nothing quite prepared someone for being alone in an actual hostile wilderness. Theory and practice were very different things. His communicator crackled with scattered transmissions from other cadets. Bren reported successful water source identification. Tala announced she had killed something called a ridgeback serpent and was using its skin for her shelter. Another cadet, whose name Quillix couldn't remember, was panicking about strange markings found near his landing zone. Quillix checked his datapad again. Ryan Foster's vital signs remained stable, his heart rate actually lower than most other cadets. The human's location marker still showed him high in the trees, barely moving. What could he possibly be doing up there? Several kilometers away, Bren worked on his shelter near the swampy region. His amphibious biology gave him advantages in wet environments, but it also meant he needed constant moisture. The shelter he built was half submerged in shallow water, with breathing holes positioned above the waterline. It wasn't elegant, but it would keep him alive. As he placed the final structural support, he noticed something odd in the distance. Through gaps in the jungle canopy, he could see movement in one of the tall trees. He extended his long tongue and tasted the air, trying to gather more information. The movement was rhythmic, deliberate. Someone was up there working on something. Bren pulled out his optical enhancer and focused on the distant tree. He could see Ryan clearly now, balanced on a thick branch while doing something with rope and wooden beams. The human had stripped several branches and was lashing them together into what looked like a platform. "Is he building a nest?" Bren muttered in confusion. His species had evolved past tree-dwelling millions of years ago. The concept of voluntarily going back up into the branches seemed primitive, even dangerous. What if he fell? What if the structure collapsed? Ground-level shelter was safer, more stable, more logical. Meanwhile, Tala had claimed a rocky outcropping as her territory. Her shelter was barely more than a cave with some additional rocks piled at the entrance for protection. But Tala didn't care about comfort. She cared about survival through strength and aggression. Let the weak cadets waste time on elaborate structures. She would survive by being the most dangerous thing in her section of jungle. She sharpened her claws against stone and thought about the human, Ryan Foster. She had watched him during training exercises, seen how he approached problems differently than other species. Humans were strange. They weren't the strongest, fastest, or most durable, yet they had a reputation across the galaxy as being unnaturally good at survival situations. Tala didn't believe in reputations. She believed in what she could see and kill. Back in his tree, Ryan had completed the basic platform structure. 3 thick branches formed a triangle about 16 meters above the ground, and he had secured a flat surface between them using rope and the straightest branches he could find. The construction was solid enough to support his weight easily, with room to spare. Now came the walls. He gathered more branches, these ones with leaves still attached, and began weaving them into the frame. The technique was simple. Overlap the leafy branches like shingles on a roof, creating a barrier that would block wind and rain while still allowing airflow. His hands moved with practiced efficiency. He had done this before many times back home during summer camps and survival training. The other cadets would call it primitive. They would say it wasn't following proper protocol. But Ryan knew something they didn't. Sometimes the old ways worked better than modern solutions. Sometimes simple was stronger than complicated. He tested each section as he built it, shaking the structure to check for weak points. The platform barely moved. The branches held firm. Good. His communicator chirped. "Cadet Foster, this is Instructor Vorn. Please confirm your shelter status." Ryan pressed the response button. "Working on it, sir. Should be done in about 2 hours." There was a pause. "Cadet Foster, you have been working for 2 hours already. Most cadets complete basic shelter in that time frame. What is your current progress percentage?" "Hard to say, sir. Maybe 60%. I'm not rushing." Another longer pause. "Not rushing." "Cadet Foster, sunset approaches. Night predators emerge in this region exactly 14 minutes after darkness falls. Your casual attitude is concerning." Ryan looked at the sky through the canopy. The light had that golden quality that meant late afternoon. "Plenty of time." "I'll be fine, sir. My shelter will hold." "Your shelter is 15 meters above ground level," Vorn said, his voice carrying a note of disapproval. "This is highly irregular. Standard protocol requires ground-based shelter with multiple exit routes. With respect, sir, I read the manual. It says we need shelter that protects us from environmental hazards and predators. It doesn't specify where that shelter needs to be." Quilix, who was monitoring the same communication channel, felt his antennae twitch in agitation. The human was technically correct. The manual didn't explicitly require ground-level shelter. But every training exercise, every simulation, every lesson had emphasized ground-level construction. It was simply understood, obvious. Why would anyone choose otherwise? He pulled up the survival database and searched for information about tree-based shelters. The results were limited. A few primitive species still used elevated platforms, but those were considered evolutionary holdovers. Modern survival doctrine had moved beyond such crude methods centuries ago. Yet the human continued building with calm confidence. as if he knew something the entire Galactic Survival Academy had somehow missed. Bren decided to contact Quillix directly. "Have you been watching the humans' progress?" "Yes," Quillix replied. "His approach is unorthodox, possibly dangerous, certainly not recommended. Should we report this as a deviation from standard practice?" "I already did. Instructor Vorn is aware. He seems content to let the human face the consequences of his choices." Tala's voice cut into their conversation. "Let him stay in his tree. When he falls and breaks his soft human bones, there will be one less competitor for graduation honors." But Ryan showed no signs of falling. His movements on the branches were sure and steady. He had secured a rope around his waist attached to the main trunk, a safety line in case he slipped. His hands gripped the bark with surprising strength. For someone from a species that supposedly evolved away from tree climbing, he seemed remarkably comfortable up there. As the sun continued its descent, Ryan added more details to his structure. He created a small overhang to shed rain. He positioned the entrance away from the prevailing wind. He even built a simple rope ladder that could be pulled up after him, cutting off any climbing access from below. Quillix watched his datapad screen with growing confusion. The human's heart rate remained calm. His movements were efficient. He showed none of the stress responses that other cadets displayed. It was as if building a tree shelter was the most natural thing in the world to him. "Perhaps," Bren suggested over the communicator, "humans are better climbers than we assumed." "Climbing ability is irrelevant," Tala snapped. "Shelter must be defensible. His position is exposed. Vulnerable, any flying predator could reach him easily." "The database shows no large flying predators on this planet," Quillix said, checking his information again. "The ecosystem here evolved mostly ground-based hunters. The trees are actually relatively safe from predation." "Then why doesn't the manual recommend tree shelters?" Tala demanded. It was a good question. Quillix didn't have an answer. Ryan secured the last section of his wall and sat back to examine his work. The structure was solid. The platform had enough space for him to lie down comfortably. The walls would block most weather while the gaps between branches allowed air circulation. The roof would shed rain. The height provided an excellent view of the surrounding area. He pulled up his rope ladder and coiled it inside the shelter. Then he sat on the edge of his platform, legs dangling over the side, and ate another ration bar while watching the sunset paint the jungle in shades of orange and red. Far below, in his ground-level shelter, Quillix sealed his entrance and activated his perimeter sensors. Night was coming, and with it, the first real test of their survival skills. He checked his weapons, reviewed his emergency protocols, and tried to calm his racing internal organs. Above in the trees, Ryan lay down on his platform and closed his eyes for a brief rest. He had at least 30 minutes before full darkness. Enough time for a short nap. His shelter was complete, and unlike the frantic cadets on the ground, he felt perfectly safe in his elevated position. Instructor Vorn zoomed in on Ryan's vital signs one more time. The human was actually falling asleep. Incredible. Either he was extremely foolish or extremely confident. Time would tell which. The sun touched the horizon and the jungle began its transformation from day to night. Darkness fell over Planet 7. Theta like a heavy curtain, and with it came the sounds that every cadet had been warned about during their briefings. Howls echoed through the jungle, some high-pitched and sharp, others deep and rumbling. Things moved through the undergrowth, their footsteps heavy enough to shake small plants. The night shift of predators had awakened and they were hungry. Quillix huddled in his shelter, his 6 limbs pulled tight against his body. His perimeter sensors blinked with alarming frequency. Something large was circling his position, testing the area, searching for weaknesses. He gripped his standard-issue shock pike and reviewed the defensive protocols in his mind. Stay calm, stay quiet. Let the predator move on to easier prey. A deep growl vibrated through the ground. The sensor readings spiked. Whatever was out there stood directly outside his shelter entrance now. Quillix could smell it through the gaps in his walls, a scent like rotting meat and wet fur. His training said to remain still, to not draw attention, to let the predator lose interest. The creature slammed against his shelter wall. The entire structure shook. Leaves fell from the roof. A gap appeared between 2 support branches, and through it, Quillix could see a massive paw covered in dark scales and tipped with claws as long as his forearm. Stay together, he whispered to himself, using an old phrase from his home world. Stay together and survive. The predator hit the wall again, harder this time. One of the support branches cracked. Quillix's antennae flattened in pure terror. His shelter was failing. The thing outside was going to break through. Several kilometers away, Bren faced his own crisis. The water level in his swampy area had risen unexpectedly. Rain had started about 20 minutes after sunset, and the downpour was heavier than his calculations had predicted. His half-submerged shelter was now fully underwater. He had retreated to a small mud bank, but it was eroding quickly. The breathing holes he had carefully positioned were useless now. He activated his communicator with shaking hands. This is Cadet Bren. I have a situation. My shelter has flooded. I'm exposed. Request guidance. Instructor Vorn's voice came back immediately. Cadet Bren, you are not authorized for extraction unless you activate your emergency beacon. Do you wish to withdraw from the examination? Bren looked at the red beacon attached to his belt. Pressing it would summon a rescue transport within minutes. It would also mean failure, humiliation, and another year of training before he could attempt the examination again. But staying here in the rising water, exposed to whatever hunted in the night, seemed like certain death. His finger hovered over the beacon button. Tala's situation was different but equally dangerous. She had chosen her rocky outcropping specifically because it was defensible. What she hadn't accounted for was that predators in this region were apparently excellent climbers. 3 creatures that looked like a cross between wolves and lizards had cornered her at the edge of her shelter. They moved with coordinated intelligence, cutting off her escape routes, forcing her backward toward the cliff edge behind her cave. She slashed at the closest one with her claws, drawing blood. The creature yelped and retreated, but the other 2 pressed forward. Tala's back was against stone now. Nowhere left to go except down a 30-meter drop. Come on then, she hissed, raising her claws. I'll take at least one of you with me. The creatures circled, their eyes reflecting the faint moonlight. They were in no hurry. They had her trapped, and they knew it. High above all this chaos, Ryan sat comfortably on his platform and watched the storm roll across the jungle. Rain pattered against his roof but barely penetrated the layered branches. A few drops made it through, but nothing that mattered. He had positioned himself under the thickest part of the canopy, where multiple layers of leaves provided natural waterproofing. Below him, he could hear the sounds of predators moving through the undergrowth. Something large passed directly beneath his tree, sniffing the ground where he had walked earlier. He watched it through gaps in his platform. A creature built low and heavy with multiple rows of teeth visible even in the darkness. The creature stopped. It had found his scent trail. It followed the path to the base of his tree and looked up, but trees meant nothing to a ground-based hunter. Its eyes weren't designed to look that far up. After a moment of confusion, it moved on, seeking prey it could actually reach. Ryan ate a ration bar and monitored his communicator. The channel was alive with distress calls. Someone named Quillix was reporting structural damage. Bren was dealing with flooding. Tala sounded like she was in combat. Others were silent, which either meant they were fine or had already activated their emergency beacons. His own shelter remained perfectly secure. The height advantage gave him complete safety from ground predators. The sturdy construction protected him from the weather. The rope ladder, pulled up inside with him, prevented anything from climbing up. He had water, food, and a clear view of his surroundings. It almost felt like cheating. Quillix's shelter wall finally gave way. The predator's massive head pushed through the gap, its jaws snapping toward him. Quillix thrust his shock pike forward, activating the charge. Electricity arced across the creature's snout. It roared in pain and withdrew, but the damage was done. His shelter was breached, compromised, useless. He grabbed his emergency pack and ran through the back exit he had thankfully prepared. The predator recovered quickly and gave chase. Quillix's multiple legs carried him fast through the jungle, but the creature behind him was faster. He could hear it crashing through the undergrowth, gaining ground. His hand reached for the emergency beacon. One press. That was all it took. Safety, extraction, failure. No, he gasped. No, I won't fail. He scrambled up the nearest tree, something his species could do but rarely practiced. His limbs found purchase on the bark, pulling him higher. The predator reached the base of the tree and stood on its hind legs, swiping at him with those terrible claws. It missed by centimeters. Quillix kept climbing until he reached a branch thick enough to support his weight. He collapsed against the trunk, his entire body shaking. He was alive. Barely. But his shelter was destroyed, and he was now trapped in a tree with nowhere to go. His communicator crackled. "All cadets, this is Instructor Vorn. 6 students have activated emergency beacons in the first 3 hours. This is slightly above average for this examination. Remember your training. Adapt to your situation, survive. 6 failures already." Quillix wasn't surprised. This planet was designed to break them. He clung to his branch and tried to form a new plan. Could he build something up here? Did he have enough materials? Enough time? Movement on a nearby branch caught his attention. He turned his head and saw Ryan's heat signature through his night vision sensors. The human was less than 50 meters away, sitting comfortably in what appeared to be a fully constructed elevated shelter. Quillix stared in disbelief. While everyone else had been following ground-level protocols, while predators had been destroying their carefully built structures, Ryan had been safe in his treehouse all along. The human had known. Somehow, he had understood something the rest of them had missed. Bren finally made his decision. He pressed his emergency beacon. A few seconds later, a bright flare shot into the sky from his location, and he heard the distant sound of a transport ship adjusting course. He sat on his eroding mud bank, water up to his neck, and felt shame wash over him more thoroughly than any rain. He had failed, on the first night, because he hadn't adapted fast enough. Tala refused to give up. When the wolf-lizard creatures lunged simultaneously, she dropped flat and rolled sideways, using their own momentum against them. 2 of them went over the cliff edge, yelping in surprise. The third caught her leg with its claws, tearing through scales. Tala screamed in pain and anger, then grabbed the creature's neck and twisted hard. Something snapped. The creature went limp. She limped back into her cave, bleeding but alive. She tore strips from her supply pack and wrapped her wounded leg. The pain was intense, but she had survived. That was what mattered. Only survival mattered. Rain continued falling. The jungle was alive with sounds of hunting and dying. Somewhere a cadet was screaming. Somewhere else another emergency beacon flared into the night. The examination was doing exactly what it was designed to do, separating those who could adapt from those who could not. Ryan checked his chronometer. 5 hours down, 67 to go. He lay back on his platform using his pack as a pillow and listened to the storm. The sounds of the jungle were almost relaxing once you got used to them. Like nature's own symphony. He understood why the other cadets were struggling. They had been taught that modern survival meant fighting against the environment, dominating it with technology and protocol. But humans had learned a different lesson long ago. Sometimes you didn't fight nature. Sometimes you just found a comfortable spot above it and waited for morning. His eyes closed, and despite everything happening below, Ryan Foster fell asleep in his treehouse, dry and safe, while the first night of the examination raged around him. Dawn broke over the jungle with the subtlety of a hammer. One moment the world was dark and filled with hunting sounds. The next moment golden light poured through the canopy, and the nocturnal predators retreated to their dens. Birds that had been silent all night suddenly erupted into song. The temperature rose rapidly as the sun climbed higher. Ryan woke naturally without alarm or panic. He stretched on his platform, joints popping slightly from sleeping on wood, and looked out over the jungle. Morning mist hung between the trees like silver curtains. It was actually quite beautiful if you ignored the fact that this entire ecosystem was trying to kill you. He checked his communicator. 14 emergency beacons had activated overnight. 14 failures out of 43 cadets. The examination was living up to its reputation. He scrolled through the remaining active signals and noticed Quillix's marker nearby, also elevated in a tree. Interesting. Below him, the ground showed signs of the night's violence. Torn vegetation, claw marks on tree trunks, and what might have been blood or just mud. It was hard to tell from this height. Whatever had been hunting down there had been thorough. Ryan pulled up his rope ladder, climbed down carefully, and stretched properly on solid ground. His legs were a bit stiff from being in one position, but nothing serious. He gathered some fallen branches for his next modification to the shelter. If he was going to spend another 2 nights up there, he might as well make it more comfortable. Quillix watched the human descend from his shelter with a mixture of awe and resentment. He himself had spent the entire night clinging to a branch, unable to sleep, barely able to move. Every muscle in his body ached. His limbs had gone numb twice. He had nearly fallen 3 times. And yet this human emerged from his tree structure looking refreshed, calm, ready for the day. It wasn't fair. Quillix had followed every protocol. He had done everything by the manual. And where had it gotten him? Trapped in a tree with no shelter, no plan, and a predator still circling below waiting for him to come down. "Human," Quillix called out, his translator making his desperate clicks sound almost dignified. "Human, I require assistance." Ryan looked up, shading his eyes against the morning sun. He spotted Quillix about 40 meters away, barely visible among the leaves. "You okay up there?" "My shelter was destroyed. I've been in this tree since last night. There is a predator below that will attack if I descend." Ryan walked over, making enough noise to alert any nearby creatures. Sure enough, something large stirred in the undergrowth near Quillix's tree. A moment later, the same scaled predator that had destroyed the shelter emerged, its eyes fixed on the movement above. "Yeah, I see it," Ryan said. He picked up a heavy branch and threw it at the creature. It bounced off its thick hide. The predator turned its attention to Ryan, growling low. "Hey, ugly. Over here. What are you doing?" Quillix shouted in horror. "Don't attract its attention. You need to get down, right? Can't do that with this thing waiting for you." Ryan picked up another branch, larger this time, and threw it harder. The predator charged. Ryan ran, leading it away from Quillix's tree. He was fast for a human. Faster than Quillix would have guessed, but the predator was faster. It was going to catch him. At the last second, Ryan jumped and grabbed a low-hanging branch, pulling himself up with the same easy motion Quillix had seen yesterday. The predator leaped after him but missed. Ryan climbed higher, branch to branch, until he was well out of reach. The predator circled below, frustrated. "Climb down now," Ryan called to Quillix, "while it's focused on me." Quillix didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled down his tree as quickly as his exhausted limbs would allow. The predator heard him but was still watching Ryan. By the time it turned back, Quillix had reached the ground and was running toward a cluster of rocks. Ryan waited until Quillix was safe, then climbed across several branches to a different tree, moving through the canopy like he had done this his entire life. The predator tried to follow below but lost track of him. Eventually it gave up and wandered back into the jungle, seeking easier prey. Ryan descended from his new position and found Quillix hiding behind the rocks, breathing hard through his spiracles. "You saved my life," Quillix said simply. Ryan shrugged. "You would have figured something out. But yeah, having a buddy system helps." He looked at the insectoid alien more closely. "You look terrible. When's the last time you ate?" "I had rations yesterday afternoon before the drop." "Nothing since?" "Dude, you need energy." Ryan pulled out one of his ration bars and offered it. "Here." Quillix took it with a trembling limb. "This is against protocol. We're being tested individually. Helping each other could be considered cheating. The rules say survive for 72 hours. They don't say we have to be alone while doing it." Ryan sat on a rock and watched the jungle. "Besides, I figure there's a difference between helping someone survive and carrying them through the test. You still have to make it on your own. I just made sure you got a fair chance." Quillix consumed the ration bar in silence. His mind was processing everything he had witnessed. The human's climbing ability, the courage to face a predator directly, the casual way he moved through the trees, and most importantly, that shelter. That brilliant, simple, elevated shelter that had kept him safe while everyone else fought for their lives on the ground. "Your tree structure," Quillix said carefully. "It's not in any of our manuals." "Probably not. It's pretty old school. We call it a treehouse back home." "And this is common human survival strategy?" "For some situations, yeah. When I was training on Earth, they taught us to assess the environment and use what works. Ground shelters are great in open terrain or caves, but in dense jungle with climbing predators and flooding risk, get off the ground, stay dry, stay safe." It was so obvious now that Quillix wanted to kick himself. Of course, elevation provided advantages in this environment. Of course, the trees offered protection. Why hadn't any of their instructors mentioned this? Why wasn't it in the protocols? "Because most species can't climb like you can," Quillix realized aloud. "My people evolved climbing ability, but we left the trees millions of years ago. It's not something we practice anymore. Most galactic species are the same." Ryan nodded. "Humans are weird. We came down from the trees but kept the ability to go back up. Came in handy for hunting, escaping predators, gathering food. We never fully committed to ground life. Kept our options open. That's terrifying." "Why terrifying?" "Because it means humans can survive in environments that most of us can't. You have advantages we don't even think about. Skills that seem primitive to us but are actually highly effective. Quilix's antennae twitched. No wonder your species has such a reputation. What reputation? That humans are terrifyingly adaptable. That you can survive anywhere, find solutions to any problem, thrive in conditions that would kill others. Quilix looked at Ryan with his compound eyes. I thought it was exaggeration. Now I'm not sure. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the jungle wake fully. Somewhere in the distance, another emergency beacon activated. 15 failures now. You should build another shelter, Ryan suggested. But this time, consider going up instead of staying down. I can help you get started if you want. That would be against protocol. That would be smart survival. Ryan stood and stretched. Look, I'm not going to force you, but think about it. 2 more nights in this jungle. Do you really want to spend them on the ground? Quilix thought about the previous night. The terror. The destroyed shelter. The hours clinging to a branch. Then he thought about Ryan sleeping comfortably in his treehouse, safe from everything below. Show me how to build one, Quilix said finally. Please, Ryan grinned. Now you're thinking. Come on, let's find you a good tree. You want something with strong branches, good sight lines, and multiple escape routes. I'll teach you the basics, but you have to do the actual building. That way it's still your achievement. They walked through the jungle together, the human and the insectoid alien, while overhead Instructor Vorn watched with great interest. This was not how the examination usually proceeded. Cadets typically remained isolated, competing rather than cooperating. But Ryan Foster seemed to operate by different rules entirely. Vorn pulled up the human's file again. Earth. A world with extreme environmental diversity. Humans had evolved to handle deserts, jungles, mountains, tundra, and everything in between. They were generalists in a galaxy full of specialists, and sometimes in survival situations being a generalist was the ultimate advantage. Interesting, Vorn muttered. Very interesting indeed. By midday, Quilix had selected his tree and begun construction. Ryan had shown him the basics, how to test branches for strength, how to lash supports together properly, how to position the platform for maximum stability. Then, true to his word, Ryan had stepped back and let Quilix do the actual work. It was harder than it looked. Quilix's limbs were good at gripping, but the fine motor control needed for rope work was challenging. His natural instinct was to build on the ground where he could use his full weight as leverage. Working elevated required a completely different approach. Several times he nearly dropped tools or materials. Twice he had to descend and retrieve branches he had accidentally knocked loose. But slowly, painfully, the platform took shape. It wasn't as elegant as Ryan's structure. The lashings were messier, the supports less uniform. But it was solid. It would hold. More importantly, it was his achievement. He had adapted. He had learned a new skill under pressure. That was what this examination was really testing, wasn't it? Not memorized protocols, but the ability to change when circumstances demanded it. Ryan spent his time improving his own shelter. He added a small food cache secured in a waterproof pouch, created a basic rain collection system using leaves and his water container, and even built a crude fishing line that he could lower to the ground if needed. He worked casually without rush, occasionally offering advice to Quilix when the insectoid alien got stuck on a problem. Several times during the day, they heard sounds of other cadets in the distance. Someone was shouting in what might have been anger or fear. Another emergency beacon flared. The examination continued its brutal filtering process. Tala limped through her section of jungle, her wounded leg making every step painful. She had survived the night, but barely. Her shelter was compromised, her supplies scattered. The wolf lizard creature she had killed lay rotting near the cliff edge, already covered with scavenging insects. She knew she should move, find a better position, but the pain in her leg made movement difficult. Her pride kept her from activating the emergency beacon. She was Tala, daughter of hunters, descendant of warriors. She would not fail because of a simple wound. She would endure. She would survive through sheer stubbornness if necessary. She found a better cave system deeper in the rocky area and claimed it as her new territory. This one had multiple exits and a defensible entrance. It wasn't comfortable, but comfort was weakness. Pain was just information. Fear was just a challenge to overcome. As the second sunset approached, Quilix finished his elevated shelter. It wasn't beautiful, but when he tested it by bouncing slightly, it held firm. He looked down at the ground far below and felt a surge of accomplishment. He had built this. Against every instinct, against every protocol he had memorized, he had adapted and created something new. Not bad, Ryan called from his nearby tree. You're a natural. I am uncertain I would describe myself as natural at this, but it is functional. Functional is what matters. How's your food supply? Quillix checked his remaining rations. Adequate for 2 more days. Water? I filled my containers at a stream this morning while you were distracting that predator. See? You're doing great. Just remember to pull your ladder up once you're settled for the night. Don't want any surprises climbing up to visit you. Yes, I remembered that from your design. Quillix paused. Human, may I ask a question? Sure, and you can call me Ryan. Ryan, why did you help me? We are competing for graduation rankings. My success does not benefit you. In fact, it potentially lowers your relative standing. Ryan was quiet for a moment, watching the sun descend toward the horizon. You know what my instructors back on Earth used to say? They said survival isn't about being the toughest or the smartest. It's about being smart enough to know when you need help and tough enough to offer it when someone else does. We do better when we work together. That's kind of humanity's whole thing. Your species values cooperation over individual achievement? Both, actually. We compete, but we also cooperate. Humans figured out pretty early that the guy who shares his food today might save your life tomorrow. Enlightened self-interest, some philosophers call it. I just call it not being a jerk. Quillix considered this. On his homeworld, survival was a solitary struggle. You succeeded alone or you didn't succeed at all. The idea of voluntary cooperation outside family units was foreign. Yet here was this human, casually upending everything Quillix thought he understood about survival strategy. Your world must be very different from mine, Quillix said. Probably, but that's what makes this whole galactic community thing interesting, right? Different approaches, different solutions. We learn from each other. Night fell for the second time. This time Quillix was ready. He sat in his elevated shelter, his rope ladder pulled up securely beside him, and watched the jungle transform into its nocturnal state. The predators emerged on schedule, howling and hunting, but they were far below, unable to reach him. He ate a ration bar and drank carefully from his water container. His body still ached from the previous night's ordeal, but his mind felt clearer. He had adapted. He had overcome. Whatever happened now, he knew he could survive it. Ryan settled into his own shelter and monitored his communicator. 18 failures total now, more than 40% of the starting group. The examination was doing its job, but those who remained were proving their worth. He heard Tala's voice on the general channel, reporting another successful fight with local predators. She sounded exhausted but defiant. Ryan respected that. Different approach than his, more aggressive and risky, but she was making it work through pure determination. The night brought more rain. Ryan's roof design proved its worth, shedding water efficiently while keeping the interior dry. He could hear Quillix rustling in his nearby shelter, probably making similar observations about his own construction. The insectoid alien was learning fast. Something large moved through the forest below. Ryan watched it pass, a creature even bigger than the one from the first night. It paused at the base of his tree, sniffing, but like its predecessor, it couldn't conceive of prey living above ground level. After a moment, it moved on. The hours passed slowly. Ryan dozed intermittently, never fully asleep but never fully awake either. It was a skill humans had developed over millennia, the ability to rest while remaining alert to danger. Useful when you were the prey species as often as you were the predator. Around midnight, his communicator crackled with an emergency. This is Cadet Lannis. My shelter is under attack. Multiple hostiles. I'm activating my beacon. Another flare lit up the jungle. 19 failures. 24 cadets remained. Quillix heard the same transmission and felt grateful for his elevated position. On the ground, every sound was a potential threat. Every shadow could hide something deadly. But up here, with solid wood beneath him and open air around him, he could actually rest. The human's simple solution had saved lives tonight, his own included. As dawn approached once more, Tala sat at the mouth of her cave, keeping watch. Her leg throbbed with infection, and she knew she should treat it properly, but she had used all her medical supplies. Pride kept her from calling for help. Stubbornness kept her upright when her body screamed to lie down. She watched the eastern sky lighten gradually and thought about the human in his tree. She had mocked his approach initially, called it primitive and weak, but he was still here, comfortable and safe while she fought for every breath. Maybe primitive wasn't the same as wrong. Maybe there was wisdom in simple solutions that she had been too arrogant to recognize. Her hand touched the emergency beacon on her belt. One press, just one press, and the pain would end. But no, not yet. She had one more day. One more night. She would make it. She would prove that strength alone could triumph. The sun rose on the third day. Ryan emerged from his shelter feeling surprisingly well rested. Quillix descended from his tree with significantly more confidence than the previous morning. Somewhere in the rocky area, Tala prepared for her final push toward survival. And high above in orbit, Instructor Vorn reviewed the data with growing fascination. The examination was entering its final phase, and the results were already revealing something unexpected about human survival doctrine that the galaxy might need to learn. The extraction ships descended through the purple-tinted atmosphere of Planet 7 Theta, exactly 72 hours after the drop had begun. Their sensors locked on to the active cadet beacons, both the emergency failures and the successful completions. 21 cadets had survived the full examination. 22 had failed. By historical standards, this was an average result, but the data told a more interesting story. Ryan climbed down from his treehouse for the last time, packed his gear efficiently, and waited at the designated extraction point. He looked surprisingly clean considering he had spent 3 days in hostile jungle. His clothes were only slightly dirty. His face showed no stress lines, and he moved with the easy energy of someone who had gotten proper rest. Quillix emerged from the forest looking considerably worse. His exoskeleton was scratched and dented. His movements were careful, favoring limbs that had been overworked during shelter construction. But he was alive, and more importantly, he carried himself with a new confidence. He had adapted. He had survived. He had learned that sometimes the protocols needed to be ignored in favor of practical solutions. "Good job," Ryan said when Quillix reached the extraction point. "You made it." "We made it," Quillix corrected. "I would not have survived without your guidance. You would have figured something out. You're tougher than you think." The extraction ship landed, its ramp extending. Other survivors emerged from the jungle, each looking exhausted in their own way. A few were wounded. Several were clearly traumatized. All of them had pushed themselves beyond their normal limits. Tala limped onto the extraction point last, her infected leg barely supporting her weight. Her scales had lost their shine and her eyes were glazed with pain and fever. But she had refused to activate her beacon. She had survived through pure stubborn will, though her body had paid a heavy price. The medical team rushed to her immediately, scanning her leg and muttering in concerned tones. Tala pushed them away weakly. "I finished. I survived. That's all that matters." "Cadet Tala," one of the medics said firmly, "you have a severe infection. You need immediate treatment." "After graduation," Tala insisted. "Not before. I earned this." The survivors were loaded onto the ship and given basic medical care and food. As they lifted off, Ryan looked out the window at the jungle below. 3 days ago, that green expanse had seemed like a death trap. Now it just looked like trees. It was amazing how perspective changed once you understood an environment. Back at the Galactic Survival Academy station, Instructor Vorn assembled the survivors in the debriefing hall. The cadets sat in their respective groups, species clustering together out of habit. Ryan sat alone at first until Quillix deliberately moved to sit beside him. A few other survivors noticed and whispered among themselves. "Congratulations," Vorn began, his grizzled face showing approval. "You have completed the most difficult examination in the known galaxy. You have proven your ability to survive in hostile conditions. You have earned your graduation and the respect that comes with it." The cadets straightened slightly, pride momentarily overcoming exhaustion. "However," Vorn continued, "this examination revealed some interesting patterns that we need to discuss, specifically regarding shelter doctrine." He activated a holographic display showing survival data from the 3 days. Heat maps showed cadet positions over time. Status indicators revealed stress levels, injury reports, and resource consumption. The data painted a clear picture. As you can see, ground-level shelter failures accounted for 63% of emergency beacon activations. Flooding, structural collapse, and predator breaches were the primary causes. This is consistent with historical data from previous examinations. He zoomed in on specific data points. However, 2 cadets employed elevated shelter strategies. Both survived the full examination with minimal resource expenditure and no significant injuries. Their stress levels remained remarkably low throughout all 3 nights. The display highlighted Ryan's treehouse and Quillix's later construction. Murmurs spread through the assembled cadets. "Cadet Ryan Foster," Vorn said, looking directly at him, "please explain your decision to build an elevated shelter, despite all standard protocols emphasizing ground-level construction." Ryan stood, feeling multiple eyes on him. "Sir, I read the manual and understood the reasoning behind ground shelters. They're stable, defensible, and match the capabilities of most galactic species. But I also assessed the specific environment we were dropping into: dense jungle, heavy canopy, known ground-based predators, and flooding risk. An elevated position addressed all those threats simultaneously. And you had confidence you could construct such a shelter?" "Yes, sir. Humans retain strong climbing ability from our evolutionary history. Treehouses are common on Earth, both for recreation and practical purposes. The skill set translated directly to this situation." Vorn nodded slowly. "And Cadet Quillix, you adopted this strategy after your initial shelter failed. What made you willing to abandon standard protocol?" Quillix stood, his translator converting his nervous clicks into steady speech. "Sir, I observed that Ryan's approach was working while mine had failed catastrophically. Adapting to new information is a core survival skill. I had climbing ability from my evolutionary history as well, though I had not practiced it in years. Learning to use it again seemed preferable to spending another night clinging to a branch in terror." Some of the other cadets made sounds that might have been laughter or agreement. "This raises an important question," Vorn said, addressing the entire group now. "Why are elevated shelters not included in our standard survival doctrine?" An uncomfortable silence followed. Finally, one of the instructors in the back spoke up. "Because most galactic species lost arboreal capabilities millions of years ago in their evolutionary development. The protocols are designed for the lowest common denominator, the skills that everyone can perform regardless of their biology." "Exactly," Vorn confirmed. "Our doctrine is universal, which is both its strength and weakness. It works everywhere for everyone, but it may not be optimal for specific situations or species. Capabilities." He turned back to Ryan. "Humans are unusual in that you retained climbing ability despite developing advanced tool use and ground-based civilization. Most species follow one evolutionary path or the other. You somehow kept both." "We like having options, sir," Ryan said simply. "Options?" Vorn repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, that is perhaps the defining characteristic of human survival strategy. You adapt to the situation rather than forcing the situation to match your protocols. This makes you unpredictable and highly effective." He paused, letting that sink in. "Some of you may have heard stories about humans, about their reputation for being able to survive anywhere, for finding solutions that other species miss, for thriving in conditions that should kill them. Today you witnessed why those stories exist. Humans don't just follow protocols. They assess, adapt, and create new solutions when necessary." Tala, who was being supported by medical braces, spoke up. "Is that not dangerous, sir? If everyone just makes their own decisions, how do we maintain standards? How do we ensure predictable outcomes?" "An excellent question, Cadet Tala, and one that highlights the difference between human military doctrine and most galactic forces. Humans have a concept they call commander's intent. They give subordinates the objective and expected outcome, but allow flexibility in execution. Most species prefer rigid hierarchies and strict protocols. Because most species need that structure," Ryan added carefully. "We're not better, we're just different. Humans got used to changing environments quickly because Earth is geologically active and climatically diverse. We had to be flexible or we'd go extinct. Other species evolved on more stable worlds. Your protocols work brilliantly for what they're designed for." Quillix tilted his head. "But in situations that don't match protocol assumptions, human flexibility provides an advantage." "Correct," Vorn said. "And that is the lesson I want all of you to take from this examination. Protocols are tools, not laws. When circumstances change, the wise survivor adapts. Some of you will find this easier than others based on your biology and culture, but all of you can learn to think more flexibly." He deactivated the holographic display. "You are dismissed to your quarters. Graduation ceremony will be held tomorrow. Those requiring medical treatment, report to the clinic immediately. The rest of you get cleaned up and rested. You've earned it." The cadets filed out slowly. Tala limped past Ryan and paused. Your treehouse saved lives, she said grudgingly, including mine indirectly. I spent the second night watching you sleep comfortably while I fought infections and predators. It made me angry. But it also made me think. About what? Ryan asked. About whether strength alone is enough. About whether pride can become stupidity. She touched her wounded leg carefully. I survived through stubbornness. You survived through intelligence. Both worked. But yours caused less suffering. Different tools for different situations, Ryan suggested. Your approach might work better somewhere else. Perhaps. Tala nodded slowly, a gesture she had learned from observing other species. Or perhaps I should learn to use more tools, including ones that seem primitive at first glance. She limped away toward the medical bay. Quillix watched her go, then turned to Ryan. You know what the strangest part of this experience was? What? Realizing that humans are exactly as scary as the rumors suggest, but not for the reasons we expected. We thought you were dangerous because you were aggressive or violent. But you're dangerous because you see solutions we don't. Because you adapt while we follow programs. That's much more frightening. Ryan laughed. We're not scary. We're just stubborn improvisers who got lucky evolutionarily. That, Quillix said seriously, is precisely what makes you scary. The next day, 21 cadets graduated from the Galactic Survival Academy. They received their certifications, their rank insignias, and the respect of being among the few who had passed the examination. Speeches were made. Honors were bestowed. Families watched via hologram from distant worlds. But in the quiet conversations afterward, in the private discussions between instructors, and in the reports filed with the Galactic Council, one topic dominated all others. The humans had done it again. They had taken a standard situation and found a non-standard solution that worked better than established doctrine. It was becoming a pattern, a concerning, fascinating, undeniable pattern. Humans weren't just surviving in the galaxy. They were quietly revolutionizing how everyone else thought about survival itself, not through force or superior technology, but through simple creativity and the willingness to question assumptions. Instructor Vorn filed his report with a personal note attached. Recommend revision of survival shelter protocols to include elevated platform options in appropriate environments. Also recommend increased study of human evolutionary adaptations and their practical applications. We have much to learn from them, whether we're comfortable admitting it or not. And somewhere in the Academy's database, Ryan Foster's treehouse design was saved, studied, and quietly distributed to other survival instructors across the galaxy. It wouldn't replace standard protocols, but it would become an option, an alternative, a reminder that sometimes the old ways weren't outdated, they were just forgotten. In the end, that was humanity's real contribution to galactic civilization. Not weapons or ships or technology, just the simple, terrifying reminder that there was always another way to solve a problem if you were willing to think differently. And sometimes that other way was just building a treehouse before sundown.